Diarrhea and pneumonia are the two biggest killers of children.
I don't know if I want a shot, Bill. Is it gonna hurt?
Perfectly.
I'm really scared. Oh no.
Juice, what are you doing?
Bill's giving me a shot.
No, that could kill you. Watch this over here. It'll show you.
Making 7 billion of those is going with the RNA approach. Side effects, that's way more, 700,000 people who will suffer from that. Undernourished, existing comorbidities to get the disease numbers way down. So war, earthquakes, and an anniversary of 1918 would
extremely generous. You donated. To end on a positive note, what gives you
worst case scenario, the ingenuity, renew our sense that we're kind of in this together, going to work, traveling like we, which is old, Dr. Fauci's doing a very good job of saying the numbers are what count here. But I do think if we get who are all about high volume and really got the testing, community-wide testing together, we've got to get rid of coronavirus from the entire in that state are very few, and you wouldn't think, hey, that's the friends that I would normally go see. We're doing video conferencing, which seems their kids there feel like it's very my life is just completely different. I wake up every world that we had before coronavirus is a global problem, and very few countries are going to get an A grade for what that's some of the mask and ventilator and other things. Maybe, although the evidence is very weak.
Is it political will? What do you think are the key elements to that? How do you see them?
We want to get back to the life we had before coronavirus. Years later, that takes 2 years. So, public good. And so we're just figuring out as we go. Break-even price for things that are helping ready for this pandemic. But I do think being able to have diagnostics within a month, we should have just the one thing that did happen there. And, so I do think we will deal with this opening normal pattern of go to meetings, watch sports events, this life that we had before. Ironic if you take somebody who's doing their best to get the world's
governments and the private sector to both accelerate the science through the ACT Accelerator and ensure that new innovations are available to everyone, everywhere, starting with those at highest risk. Like an orchestra, we need all instruments to be played in harmony to create music that everyone enjoys. One or two instruments playing by themselves just won't suffice when the world is waiting and listening intently. We will work to bring the band together to our core that we do it best when we do it.
Your health of the child to be vaccinated.
You're required to get vaccinated. That's like a law, a rule.
They have to get the shot. The vaccinations are so important. This is really going around now. They have to get their shot.
It wasn't until 1998 that a mother came up to me and said, Dr. Larry, did you know that there's mercury in vaccines? And I said, no, I did not. And as a medical student, I was trained to critically think. If you see it, you go after it and try and figure out if there's a question to ask. So instead of just ignoring it, I looked further into the vaccine ingredients, and I didn't understand why these same ingredients were actually in vaccines. I was starting to hear stories from parents, not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of stories from parents who took a very healthy child into their doctor's office and then found that their child lost much of their health, whether it was their speech, whether it was seizures, whether it was death, whether it was asthma, allergies, eczema, whether it was autism, whether it was learning disabilities, whether it was inflammatory bowel disease, autoimmune diseases. And
every one of those parents were told it had nothing to do with the vaccine.
Yeah, I pushed you.
There is no study to prove that unvaccinated children have ever been proven to start an epidemic. I have been seeing families in my practice for over 20 years that have opted out of vaccination. They are the healthiest children I have ever seen. And more parents are understanding the dangers of vaccines, and that's why we're seeing such pressure to mandate vaccines, because more of the science is coming out. We assume that if we vaccinate, we're getting protection. We assume that if we vaccinate, we're stopping spread of disease. Those are assumptions that have never been solidified in science.
I asked the dad what happened, and the dad tells me, yeah, the shot went in, he was sitting in the chair. I basically instantly see his whole face goes white, his head like lolls back, you know, he's like staring straight up, his eyes go to the back of his head, he goes limp, and his whole body convulses like 3 or 4 times, maybe 30 seconds or so, maybe after you've been given the shot, roughly. And what's kind of interesting is this is a family who had not vaccinated. They were not planning to vaccinate, and then they decided they had to because of the new school law.
A seemingly completely healthy little girl playing freeze tag in the front yard. Mom wakes her up the next morning. She is paralyzed from the neck down. This after just getting the flu shot vaccine with me, her mother, Carla Grivna. Carla, why do you believe this is because of the flu shot?
Because there was nothing else, no other life-changing events or no other medications out of the ordinary given. It had been the only thing that had been given to her or happened to her during the time period. And extensive testing was done at the hospital to try to find another cause, and none was able to be found.
I mean, I have to come from the perspective of a parent who has a vaccine-injured child. I took my bright, healthy, precocious little 2.5-year-old boy in for a 4th DPT shot. And within hours of that shot, I witnessed him suffer a convulsion, a collapse shock, a state of unconsciousness, and he was eventually diagnosed with minimal brain damage, including multiple learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder. We have seen children become disabled and chronically ill. 1 in 6 child in America is now learning disabled. Why are so many highly vaccinated children so sick?
A 5-pound preemie gets the same vaccination as a 10-pound full-termer. They need to be individualized.
And explain why you feel this way and why you decided not to vaccinate your youngest children.
So I have 3 children. My oldest, I was kind of the sacrificial lamb. He was vaccinated and had a huge amount of thimerosal, huge amount of mercury. And after he had the MMR and the chickenpox vaccination on the same day, we never saw him again for 3 years.
Never saw him again, meaning
he developed autism. He lost language, he lost social skills, he lost bowel control, he became very sick within hours of vaccination. So I held his hand over the proverbial fire. He got burned. Don't ask me to line up my other 2 children to get burned again. What kind of parent would I be?
Like if I was a doctor, I would want you to get sick.
Yeah.
Because it's the more...
Do any vaccines contain egg protein?
Oh, yes, influenza.
Do any vaccines contain gelatin from pigs?
Yes.
Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain human albumin?
Oh, yes.
And what is human albumin?
Human albumin is part of human serum. It's part of the blood that is liquid.
That could be problematic, right?
Well, it could be. I mean, if the individual is not healthy.
Or if maybe some of the human blood components bind to some of the aluminum and develop antibodies, self-antibodies, correct?
If they develop antibodies against a serum component, that would not be good.
Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain MRC5 human diploid cells?
Yes. Rubella, varicella, hepatitis A.
What are MRC5 cells?
They are human fibroblast cell strain. They were created by taking fetal tissue and from a particular fetus that was aborted by maternal choice, and the cells, the so-called fibroblast cells, were cultivated.
Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain WI38 human diploid lung fibroblasts?
Well, they used to, but I don't think anything is made in those cells anymore.
If you could turn to page 3 for MMR and MMRV. Do you see that within the ingredient list that lists WI38 human diploid lung fibroblasts?
Yes, I do see that.
Isn't it true that human DNA in vaccines is typically purposely fragmented?
Yes, I would say mostly for theoretical reasons, doesn't want to put DNA into intact DNA into vaccines.
These fetuses were all 3 months or older when aborted, correct?
Yes.
What organs did you harvest from these fetuses?
Well, I didn't personally harvest any, but a whole range of tissues were harvested by co-workers.
Okay. And these pieces were then cut up into little pieces, right?
Yes.
And they were cultured?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the pieces of the fetuses were pituitary gland that were chopped up into pieces too. Mm-hmm. Okay. Included the lung of the fetuses?
Yes.
Okay. Included the skin?
Yes.
Kidney?
Yes.
Spleen?
Yes.
Heart?
Yes.
And tongue?
I don't recall, but yeah, probably yes.
Are you aware that one of the objections to vaccination by the plaintiff in this case is the inclusion of aborted fetal tissue in the development of vaccines and the fact that it's actually part of the ingredients of vaccines?
Yeah, I'm aware of those objections.
Okay. Are you an atheist?
Yes.
When you were a child, what vaccines did you receive?
Diphtheria. In childhood, I think it was probably only diphtheria.
You're going to let the government run healthcare? They screw everything up. So why would you let them be the ones to stick a disease into your arm? I would never get a swine flu vaccine or any. I don't trust the government, especially with my health.
This is thimerosal, which is labeled very toxic. Has cumulative effects, can cause damage to the kidneys, to the respiratory system, skin, to the nervous system. It specifically warns on here that it can cause reproductive and developmental toxicity, meaning that it can cause things like autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders. This is immensely toxic stuff. And this is what's in the vaccine. It's important to realize we're talking about a whole range of products. Vaccines are a big one because, of course, you're directly injecting it. For example, this is tetanus vaccine. This one expires, it's a little outdated now, in 2007. Here's the thimerosal. 1 to 10,000 is a preservative. Perhaps the biggest one in the U.S., at least, that's for exposure to mercury is the influenza vaccine. Influenza vaccine is now recommended for all pregnant women, all infants, all children on a yearly basis.
It needs to be stopped.
This is the influenza vaccine from Adventist Pasteur, their flu zone. Thimerosal, 25 micrograms of mercury per dose.
But I'd like to point out that a lot of people didn't know, and I'm one of them. I've given 2,000 RhoGAM shots. I've been in vaccines for 35 years. I didn't know that RhoGAM had thimerosal in it, so I think a lot of the doctors were unaware. They were unaware that even the word thimerosal meant mercury.
Because this new vaccine is not like your normal flu vaccine. This is something very different. This is something brand new. This is something completely experimental on the human race. And it's not just about being a different vaccine. There are technologies that are being introduced with this vaccine that can change the way we live, who we are, and what we are, and very quickly. I think that, some people that you might know these names, Elon Musk, who is the founder of SpaceX and Tesla Automotive, as well as Ray Kurzweil, who is one of the bigwigs of Google. These are self-proclaimed transhumanists. They believe that we should go to human 2.0. It hasn't even made any vaccine for a human before. It's made no medicine for a human before. This will be their first run. You must know that Moderna was in the news recently because it really fast-tracked. It's like the other companies, it's fast-tracking the vaccine. It's going from phase 1 to phase 2 very, very quickly. In fact, it's gone from phase 1 to phase 3 in its experiments from March of this year until currently. I mean, that is unbelievable. It usually takes 5 or 6 years. How are they able to do this with the safety and efficacy data that we need? And I want you to know that in phase 2, they're only using between 30 and 45 humans. In Moderna's test study, they only used 45 humans. And with the high dose vaccine group, they got 100% of those people got side effects, 100. That's only in the short side effect profile. In the low dose vaccine, 80% got systemic side effects. Now, we don't even know the long-term side effects from that. We would need a lot longer time, right? Maybe years. But we do know, based on previous animal studies of using this technology, that you can expect possibly increased cancer rates, increased mutant genes, mutagenesis.
Leo Smith was a year and a half old when he had a bad reaction to a vaccine, and tonight his mother is sharing his story for the first time.
This video of Leo Smith was shot about 8 months after he received 2 vaccine injections, including one for diphtheria and whooping cough, hours after getting the vaccine.
Within about 3 days after that he started to have hives and welts and joint swelling.
Amy Mitten-Smith says within days he had hives, joint swelling, and a fever, and within weeks, seizures. 2 months after the injections, the symptoms subsided, but Leo stopped talking. 8 months later, the original symptoms returned after Leo caught a cold. This time, Leo developed an eye tic soon after he was diagnosed with autism and later other neurological disorders.
I thought I was protecting him by taking him in to get his vaccines, and I ended up injuring him for the rest of his life.
The vaccine court ruled that the vaccine did in fact injure Leo and awarded him $55,000.
I regret not looking into it, and now it's too late.
I apologize, but I'm in a generation where I got 7 shots. 26 years later, my daughter got 10. Her son got probably 60. My new grandson's expected to get 72, and I just watched you add more. I'm appalled.
You ask questions. There's a system in our country that says you must vaccinate, and those parents who speak up about their concerns about vaccines are usually parents whose children have already suffered. They're the ones who have said, I listened to you.
Nick Bratney from Tustin, California. I'm an attorney, a mother of 3 kids, and doctors and parents know best. I oppose.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Heidi Hook, and for my children, for my patients, and for my Hippocratic Oath, I strongly oppose.
Thank you.
My name's Laura Menard. I'm a registered nurse and a holistic nurse coach. And my 2 children are vaccine injured. One of them would not qualify under your bill, and they deserve to go to school.
Thank you.
Strongly oppose.
Thank you.
My name is Trina Perkins from Irvine, California, mother of 2, grandmother of 4. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Jacqueline DiMajan from Dana Point, educated grandma of 7. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I wonder if the CDC has conducted or facilitated a study comparing vaccinated children with unvaccinated children yet. Have you done that?
Again, most recently in 2011, and their conclusion again was not just looking at the work that was done at CDC, but with a total body of evidence, was suggesting that vaccines and their components did not increase the risk for autism.
My time's very limited here. So clearly, definitely, unequivocally, you have studied vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
We have not studied vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Actually, never mind. Just stop there. That was the meaning of my question. You wasted 2 minutes of my time. I've seen a chart that ranks the longevity of the 30 nations with the best mortality rates in the world, starting with Iceland, Sweden, Singapore, and on down. We didn't even make the top 30. We're the 34th. And ironically, we require more vaccinations than any other country that's healthier, has a less mortality rate than us. Do you see any correlation whatsoever, either one of you, to the 34th worst mortality rate and the most vaccinations to the ones with the least required vaccinations and the lowest mortality rate? They also have children that, past age 20 in those countries too.
I'm sorry, gentleman's time's expired. Did you want to answer?
No, I think I had an opportunity. Okay.
The shot, I am pregnant. I don't want my baby to have that in his system. I refuse. No, I don't want it. I refuse. I refuse. Yes, I can. I'm pregnant. That's not my doctor. All right, I'm not taking it. Y'all, when they leave you.
Here's your choice.
No.
You can take it like an
adult. No. What made her say for me to do this?
Or
crazy?
You can take it like an adult, or we're going to hold you down and give it to you.
I want to wait for my mom to come here.
You're not waiting for your mom.
I don't want that. I don't need it.
I can see your pressured speech.
Because you're trying to give me what I don't need. Please don't touch me. Because I know you're all against me. Because I'm black. Because I'm more. Because I'm more. Yeah. Because I'm MOOR. All right.
All right.
Okay.
So my baby's going to have that in his system. And I'm going to...
It's all right.
I'm going to... It's all right. I'm suing.
It's safe. They're not going to give you something that's not safe.
I know. I'm suing. They're trying to have this in my baby. And they know that what they're doing. They're trying to do this to every black person to make them... to test on them. Since they want to test on animals, too. They're getting sued. Don't even worry. They did this to my cousin.
What about that? Sullivan?
Yeah, that too.
Okay. Emotions are running high at the state capitol today. Governor Jerry Brown has signed the controversial vaccine bill into law. This means parents will no longer be able to use personal or religious beliefs to opt out of the vaccines required for school.
I will be suing if my daughter is denied the right to go to school.
On what ground?
Discrimination. In California law, it is a fundamentally protected constitutional right to be able to go to school.
Across the state, people opposed to California's strict new vaccine laws are joining forces to fight for the right not to vaccinate their kids. CBS 2's Christy Fajardo reports from one of the rallies in Santa Monica.
Parents call the shots.
Opponents of California's mandatory vaccine laws vow
we're not going away.
Holding rallies across the state, including this one in Santa Monica, promising to repeal SB 277 by ballot initiative or in the courts.
We will be out protesting every chance we get to just say we think it's an impingement on our freedoms and our rights and their education. I want my kid to get an education.
Protester Cindy Kendall makes that point because under SB 277, she will have to choose between homeschooling and vaccines, which she feels aren't safe. The law signed by the governor requires all children to be vaccinated before attending school.
We're going to do everything that we can, everything, whatever that involves. We're going to address it very succinctly.
Passionate plea from protesters at the Capitol. I am the only thing standing between my son and this bill. Aaron Romero Massengal claims her son would lose his medical vaccine exemption under Senate Bill 276, chaining herself to the Capitol doors in protest. He's my son. I committed to protecting him. That is my job.
If you do not leave this area, you will be subject to physical arrest and or detention.
Despite protesters' attempts to shut down the Senate session, senators ultimately voted in favor of this companion bill. And now that this bill has been signed into law, it is expected to go into effect on January 1st. But these protesters say their fight isn't over.
If the right to decide what goes into our bodies and those of our children is wrongfully taken from us, what meaningful rights do we have?
The vaccines to be made quickly. They could also be administered by yourself. So the idea is to get a Band-Aid. It looks like a Band-Aid you buy in the drugstore. It's shipped to you through Amazon or UPS or some other shipping service. You take it out of the package, you put it on your hand like this, and then you take the sticker off and voila, you've been vaccinated. So how is that possible? Well, in this Band-Aid, it has little tiny spicules, little tiny needles, and this was designed after a snake viper fang bite, okay, or snake viper bangs. So little snake bites. Anyway, in these tiny little spicules, they claim you won't really feel it that much. There's their little hydrogel. It's a material called hydrogel. Inside the hydrogel would be a luciferase enzyme as well as the vaccine itself. Okay, so what is all that? So first of all, you're getting the vaccine. It's modified RNA or modified DNA. Let's take Moderna, modified RNA. So in that modified RNA, the idea is that the microneedles will puncture into your cell membrane, okay? And this synthetic piece of an RNA, it's a code for the part of the virus where they could use a synthetic DNA to code for the part of the virus, would go into your nucleus, your body would start transcribing it, would start reading it, and making more of that part of the virus. Well, why would we want to make more of the virus or part of the virus? The idea is your body would get used to seeing it, would know how to make antibodies, and would have an improved T-cell response. And the idea is then when you saw it in the future, your body would already know how to fight it, and it would be a better response. That's the idea. The problem with that is they're using a process called transfection. And transfection is a way that we make genetically modified organisms. Okay, I think you know about those fruits and vegetables. They're not as healthy as the normal wild type fruit and vegetables. So possibly you could extrapolate that to a human. If we become genetically modified, we would not be as healthy, okay? We don't have long-term studies on this anyway, which is unbelievable. And, you know, the vaccine manufacturers have made the statement, this will not alter our DNA, our genome. I say that is not true. Because if we use this process to make a genetically modified organism, why would it not do the same thing to a human? I don't know why they're saying that. Now, if you look at the definition of transfection, it'll tell you that it can be a temporary change in the cell. And I think that's what the vaccine manufacturers are banking on. It's temporary. Or it's a possibility for it to become stable, to be taken up into the genome, and so stable that it will start replicating when the genome replicates, meaning it is now a permanent part of your genome. That's a chance that we're taking. So it could be temporary or it could be permanent. And we would never know that for years down the road, honestly. So here we go. We've got something that can alter our genome. It's a possibility. And another thing on that, if they're altering the genome, what would be the effects? I told you previously some of the side effects, but also we need to know that this is a synthetic piece of DNA or RNA, okay? And if it becomes taken up into the genome of a human, it's synthetic, it's not from nature. And if you look at the Supreme Court justice ruling on synthetic DNA or genes, it can be patented, and patents have owners. So what does that mean for us? What if this gets into our genome? Does that mean Moderna or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or the Department of Defense, all of these people who are involved in the patents, or are they somehow going to own part of our genome? It's a possibility. You need to know that. So that's one part of this delivery system, just one. Now let me go to the next. The next part of the delivery system is a luciferase enzyme. Okay, they named it, they patented it luciferase. I don't like that name. Luciferase because it has bioluminescent qualities, which means it can produce a light, or it has a light source. And all of this would be under your skin and you cannot see it. Now, the luciferase is an idea because they want to make sure that you're vaccinated. They don't trust medical records. They don't trust you saying that you got vaccinated. They want to make sure. And they want to make sure it was successful. A successful transfection, a successful gene modification. So when you get the luciferase enzyme, if you have an iPhone or a special app on the iPhone, you can scan over that area and it will give a digital code, a digital imprint, a digital pattern, something that will identify that you were vaccinated. It holds your vaccination record. It also gives you an ID, a number, a barcode, a branding, whatever you want to call it, a tattoo. It's all the same thing. You now become like a product. So we have that. Now the third thing I mentioned was hydrogel. So hydrogel is actually an invention from DARPA, the Department of Advanced Research Projects Agency. This is kind of a sci-fi kind of a group from the Department of Defense, Pentagon, of the U.S. government. They make these fantastic inventions. So one of them is hydrogel. Hydrogel, you can YouTube, look on YouTube, look at Profusa is one of the companies, DARPA as well as hydrogel, and you'll find some little 2-minute clips that they describe. So hydrogel is nanotechnology, microscopic little robots. And these little robots, actually, I know it sounds crazy, it's still crazy to me, but it's possible, okay? They can disassemble, reassemble, assemble and make different things. So with this hydrogel, it's really nanotechnology. So that's something, robotic or something that's artificial intelligence. It has the ability to connect with artificial intelligence. So this means that a human can now connect to directly and gather information from our bodies and gather it and connect with your smartphone, with the cloud, with some other smart device. And once this is done, this is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Think about that. Think about how immediately that could change our privacy. Immediately it can change our autonomy. Immediately change our freedoms. This can gather data like your blood sugar, your oxygen, your blood pressure. Okay, those sound great. But it also can gather many other things. It can gather, they say, your emotions or your menstrual cycle, your activity, if you've fallen, your nutrients in your body. If you took medicines, it's a potential to see if you took illicit drugs. It's got a potential to see almost anything that goes on in your body. And all of this information is going where? That has not been addressed. Who's protecting this information? What are they using it for? This is really serious stuff, guys. This is all being proposed to being unveiled in the next vaccine, okay? The other thing to know is with this nanotechnology, hydrogel, artificial intelligence, hookup, just like your cell phone, you can send a text message, you can send an email, but also you can receive them back. So that means we could receive information. What information would be coming back into us? Would it affect our mood, our behavior? Would it affect, how we think or our memories? If you haven't watched the movie Matrix, I think you should. I think there's some truth in that, in that movie. I see so many wrong things with this vaccine. And I see that we are not talking about it in the major media. And I see that, I feel that these companies are outright lying to us when they say they cannot affect our DNA. Because by all definitions that they are using, this can affect our DNA. I also want you to know that one of the mandates, the Emergency Preparedness Act, that says they can force a vaccine on us. They cannot force a vaccine if there is a viable treatment for the COVID-19. And I want you to know that doctors around the world are being censored about treatment options for COVID-19 or prevention for COVID-19. Because if there's a true treatment or prevention, then they can't force this vaccine on us. I want to bring that up because what in the world is the motivation of doing this? Is it really in the health of all of us? As a doctor, I can't see how this is in the true health of the entire world. I think there's another motive, another agenda going on. The more I look at this, the more that comes up.
And the right side of the road was filled with, which I thought was portable toilets. I never looked at them that close. Same in color, maybe black, but which was an odd color. And I was sitting there going over my notes, and a van pulled alongside of me that turned out to be the property owner. And he greeted me, and he was by himself, and so we had a good little dialogue there, and I asked him about the field of black boxes. What were they? Because I'd never seen anything like that. And his statement was that if he told me, I would be one of few people in Madison, Georgia that knew about them. And he says they're disposable coffins, I believe he told me. He said there was 125,000 there, and they were stacked, he told me 15 high. I asked him who owned them, and he stated that the CDC owned them and that they were leasing his land for storage.
Things are get on an airplane. Should masks be made of a certain material? Gloves or handkerchiefs effective? Can you talk about PPE for the general public?
Well, the best PPE for the general public, if possible, right now, is to maintain the physical and social distancing. But as we've said, and I think all of us would agree, there are certain circumstances in which it is beyond your control when you need to do necessary things, like go to the drugstore and get medication, go to the grocery store and get your food. I believe it was Dr. Redfield at the CDC who first said that, about getting some sort of a covering. We don't want to call it a mask because back then we were concerned we'd be taking masks away from the healthcare providers, but some sort of mask-like facial covering, I think for the time being, should be a very regular part of how we prevent the spread of infection. Then just do it. I mean, I think people sometimes, they go to one extreme versus the other. Either you're going to lock yourself in a closet, or you're going to be out, partying with no man.
Warning to the White House that the coronavirus could spread through even breathing and talking. I think they were sort of making the case that maybe this is more airborne than we realized. I remember the other day we talked about the fact that you still go outside for runs, you run at late night even with your wife. With this new information, would you still do that? Are you worried about this?
Yeah. I know, Sanjay, the study came from a scientist at the NIH, actually. It was a letter, I believe, to the New England Journal of Medicine, in which they showed that when you just literally speak, you don't have to cough, you don't have to sneeze, there's an aerosol that goes out just a very short distance, just a couple of feet. And I think that's one of the things that's putting a red flag for people. Why? People who are completely asymptomatic, not coughing, not sneezing, we know now are transmitting the virus, which brings up a number of issues. First, it underscores why you should continue to try and stay 6 feet away from someone, because that would obviate that right away. The other thing, it brings up the question that you brought up on this show before, is the question of whether people should be wearing some sort of a facial cloth covering, not taking masks away from the people who need them, like healthcare providers, but that clearly generates that question.
So I mean, if it even goes a couple feet, but if it stays airborne for any time at all, would you change your behavior based on this information, like running outside, for example?
No, Sanjay, I wouldn't, because I believe that the 6 foot distance would really obviate that concern.
Either, and I know the reason back then was because you thought that PPE should be left for the frontline healthcare professionals and not have everybody else on the planet trying to gobble it up for their own personal use. But had you back then advocated strongly for some sort of facial covering, whether it be a scarf like Dr. Birx was wearing, or whether it might be these cloth masks that are ubiquitous now, would we be in a different place now than we are?
You could always second guess yourself and say what could have been or what should have been done wearing a mask. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. Consequences, people keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
I'm hoping that you can tell us a bit more about how your understanding of what we should do has evolved.
On wearing masks. I mean, masks are very important. They protect you from giving infection to someone else. And right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. In the animal data, as well as the early human data, we feel cautiously optimistic that we will have a vaccine. But I don't see this disappearing the way SARS-1 did.
Growing debate, Dr. Fauci, in this country about the pace and progress of reopening. And I'd like to read you today a tweet from the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, and get your reaction to it if I could. He tweeted a little bit earlier today, quote, "Hospitals are not overwhelmed. Most of us will be exposed anyway since we can't sequester until there's a vaccine."
I mean, what I do myself, right now, I'm very careful about wearing a mask. But every evening, and it's now late at night because I don't know anymore. When I go home, my wife and I, we go out for a 4-mile jog, power walk, whatever you want to call it. And I do this. It's like this. And I'm chatting with her. If I see 50 yards ahead, and then I'm outside.
But once Dr. Fauci thought he was off camera, the mask came off literally. Want to see hypocrisy in action? Look at this. Here's Dr. Fauci sitting within 6 feet of other people in a mostly empty stadium without wearing his mask. Ooh. Well, he was immediately called on this, but rather than copping to it and being honest, he acted like so many people in power do and scorned anyone criticizing him. Watch.
I think this is sort of mischievous with this thing going around. I had my mask around my chin. I had taken it down. I was totally dehydrated and I was drinking water, trying to rehydrate myself. And by the way, I was negative COVID literally the day before. So I guess people want to make a big of that. I wear a mask all the time when I'm outside. So anyone at any given time could be infected, don't even know it, and feel perfectly well.
Straight to a Fox News alert, the White House preparing to release nationwide recommendations for wearing those face masks as coronavirus cases grow across the U.S.
This comes as President Trump slams 3M after a whistleblower claims the company is selling medical masks to other countries.
It was not a very robust study. It is still possible that there is a beneficial effect, but the study that was just quoted, on a scale of strength of evidence, that's not overwhelmingly strong. It's an indication, a hint of it. But getting back to what you said just a moment ago, that X percent, I think you said 37% of doctors feel that it's beneficial. We don't operate on how you feel. We operate on phase 1 trials and are 2/3 of the way through the phase 1 trial. And then I explained to you a few times that you then go into the next phase, which is not on the brink.
47, and then yesterday, 911 deaths. So 136 fewer deaths over the course of 48 hours. Why is that?
136 fewer deaths, you're saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you have an evolution.
You now regret not advising people more forcefully to wear masks earlier?
Okay, we're going to play that game. Let me explain to you what happened back then.
Should be a yes or a no.
No, there's more than a yes or no by the tone of your question.